Are we ready?
We're rolling.
Okay, tip number 1. It's grace, not law. Don't try to make up any ground that you've missed. If you prayed 4 of the Psalms from yesterday and instead of 5, don't wake up this morning thinking that you've got to make that up. You don't want to do that. The goal is, this might sound a little funny, but the goal is not to read all the Psalms every month. The goal is to use the Psalms today as fuel for your walk with God. So don't try to make it up if you miss, and don't labor under any sense of guilt if you miss something. If you think of it that way, it'll quickly become a burden, and that's not our intention. And remember, too, there's always next month. We're going through the Psalms every month, so if you miss something today, that's okay. Next month, it'll come around again. It's grace, not law.
Number 2, you want to keep going?
Yeah, right.
You want to start over?
No. Okay, I was going to pause between each.
We can just go straight through, 1 to 5.
Oh, okay, except I was going to get part of my...
Are you having trouble seeing it now?
No, I don't. Can I pick up from there? Or should I do number 1 again?
If you want to start over just now that you've...
Yeah, now I'm a little, yeah.
All right, let's do that. Let's start over. I'm just going to keep rolling, and here it comes. You want to start off, too, by saying, rather than just... We've got some great tips for reading the Psalms. Just something
Yeah,
to preface
okay,
it. And then
right.
here's tip number 1.
Do you want me to have... yeah, okay. I'm thinking ahead to the other one and then the other one because it's going to be 5 at a time. Should I say how about tips?
First, tip number 1.
That's good enough. You don't want...
Tip number 2.
Yeah, okay. All right. We ready?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, we've got some tips on how to pray through the Psalms. Tip number 1, it's grace, not law. The idea is that we're going to use these Psalms as fuel for walking with God today. So the point of it is not, this might sound counterintuitive to you, but the point is not that we read all 150 Psalms every month. The point is that today I'm using the Psalms for my walk with God. So therefore, if you missed something yesterday, don't wake up this morning with the burden of trying to make that up. If you go about it that way, it's going to quickly become just that. It'll become a burden, and that's not our intention. And anyway, we're doing this month after month, so it's going to come around again next month. So remember, it's grace, not law. Tip number 2, don't be surprised at the difficulty. This is a new practice for all of us, and as any new practice, it's going to take time to get used to it. We're going to learn together. We're all rookies, so to speak. So don't be surprised at the difficulty. That's my second tip. Tip number 3, don't just read the psalm, pray it. Don't just read it, pray it. Now, here I want to remind you that there's not just one right way to pray a psalm. So you don't labor under trying to figure out just the right way, or did I do this the right way? Don't think of it that way. You just take the psalm, and as you begin to read it, you pray and ask God to help me. Help me, Lord, to pray this and to use this for my prayer. So this tip number 3 is don't just read it, pray it. Tip number 4. Find the attributes of God. This is an important tip. Sometimes when you're wondering what to do with the psalm, how to turn it into prayer, you look in the psalm and you find attributes of God, what God is like. Sometimes it just says something like his steadfast love and his faithfulness. It just names an attribute of God. Other times it shows God doing something, and so you see what God is like because of that. So you find the attributes of God, and then you turn that into prayer by saying, Lord, I worship you because you are, and then you name the attributes that the psalm has. So right there, you're using the psalm to worship God. So tip number 4 is find the attributes of God. And tip number 5 is pray the easy phrases. Some of the psalms are a little bit challenging. You're not quite sure what to do with them. But somewhere in there, there's going to be something easy. It might be just one verse, or it might be one phrase, that there's something about that phrase that resonates with your heart that morning or afternoon or evening with what's going on in your life. Pray that. Pray the easy phrases. That's tip number 5.
Very good. Ready for 6? All right, we're rolling.
Okay, some more tips on how to go about praying the Psalms. Tip number 6. Do what it says to do. This is really interesting. If the psalm is telling you to do something, then just do it. I'm looking here at Psalm 29, verses 1 and 2, where it says, "Ascribe to the Lord, O heavenly beings, ascribe to the Lord glory and strength." And it goes on, it says, "Ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name." In that situation, see, it's telling me to do something, to ascribe to God glory. And so that's what I do when I'm praying it. Then I say, Lord, I give you glory. You're the God of glory and strength and holiness, everything that's mentioned there. So tip number 6 is do what it says to do. Now, tip number 7, if the psalm asks, then you ask too. Sometimes the psalms are asking for things, asking God for things. The psalmist who wrote it is praying and requesting something. Well, you can use that then to begin to ask that for yourself also. Again, in Psalm 29, at the end, it says, "May the Lord give strength to his people. May the Lord bless his people with peace." Should we stop? We got kitchen action going on there.
It's all right. Start with number 7 again.
Okay.
I'll just zoom a little.
Okay. Tip number 7, if the psalm asks, then you ask too. Often in the Psalms, it goes beyond our praise, and then it leads us to request things from God. So when the psalmist is asking things from God, we can ask them too. Again, in Psalm 29, in verse 10 and 11, it says, verse 11, it says, "May the Lord give strength to his people. May the Lord bless his people with peace." So he's asking God for strength and peace. Hey, the day that you're praying that, you may need strength and peace too. So if they're asking, you ask. You say, "Lord, give me strength for today. Give me peace about these things I'm worried about," or whatever. So if it asks, you ask. Tip number 8, don't be afraid to sing. These are prayers, but they're also songs. And some of us aren't into singing as much as other people are. I'm not super into singing. I'm not naturally gifted in that kind of a way. And yet it's a blessing. And often in the Psalms, it's telling us, sing, sing. So you can be praying a psalm, reading it, and it's exhorting you to sing. So grab a songbook or a hymnal if you have one where you are, or you just remember a song and you do that. Or if the Lord leads you, this is a little stretching, but you can begin to make up a song on the spot. Usually if I do that, I take a look to the right and left, make sure nobody's listening, but I just sing between me and the Lord. So on this tip, it's don't be afraid to sing. Tip number 9, make it personal. Sometimes the psalmist is saying he about God. He uses the word he. So the psalmist will be saying, he is wonderful, he is mighty, he is glorious. You can take that and make it personal. So you turn it around and say you. So you change the he to you, and you say, Lord, you are wonderful, you are mighty, you are glorious. And what you're doing is you're praying. There you are, you're praying the psalm. So this tip is make it personal. And number 10, this may sound a little funny, but the people of God are the people of God. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, there's all sorts of language in the Psalms about the Jewish people. A lot of language like the daughters of Judah or Zion or Jerusalem. And it's because the context is in these Psalms were written in the Jewish nation. And what do we do with that? Well, we remember that the people of God are the people of God. So although these Psalms were written in the context of the Jewish people, and we can still pray these things for the Jewish people, we would miss something if we didn't realize that the people of God today, we can transfer it from the Jewish people to us, so that we are the people of God. The followers of Christ are the people of God. So when it's speaking about the people of God in Jewish terms, just translate that in your mind to us, the followers of Jesus Christ. Now, I'm not saying that there's no application to the Jewish nation. I'm not saying that at all, but for our devotional life, our praying of these, we'll miss something if we don't just say, okay, he's talking about the city of Zion. Okay, now I'm talking about the church. I'm talking about me and the people in the church. And I just add one little strength to this one. When it talks right down in about the temple, I remember in 1 Peter, it talks about how we together are the temple of God when we meet together. So I like to take those that are about the temple, and I like to think of them and pray them with the sense of the people of God, my brothers and sisters in Christ, when we're gathered together and we're worshiping God. And I begin to pray those things from the psalm for us when we're gathered. And I think that's really strong. So just remember, the people of God are the people of God. That one was a little longer. And
That's fine.
was it okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't.
All right, and now tip 11.
Okay, now tip number 11. If it's not your problem, give thanks. What I mean by that is sometimes when we're reading in these Psalms, there's a problem. The psalmist has a big problem. Well, what happens when you're reading that psalm and you want to pray it, but the problem that he's having at the moment is not your experience? You're not having that problem now. And this little tip is, well, if it's not your problem, give thanks. So first of all, you can thank the Lord that right now, this is not your problem. You give him thanks for that. But then secondly, what you can do is think back in your life. Often what happens with me is I'll look at a problem that I'm not experiencing now, but I can remember when I did, and then I give thanks for the way he delivered me from it. So this tip is not your problem. We'll give thanks then. Now, tip number 12, and it goes along this with what I just said, but that is, if not you, then who? Sometimes when we're reading the Psalms and trying to pray them, what's being talked about is not my present need. But then I can think about someone else that I know, and it is their need. And it may be that while I'm praying or seeking to pray through a psalm that's foreign to my present experience, the Lord brings somebody to my mind that so-and-so is going through this. Well, then pray for them. See, it's not all about me, so pray for them. And that's praying the Psalms. So this tip is, if not you, then who? Now, tip number 13, include your fellow believers. You have probably noticed, along with me, that when you're praying through the Psalms are very community-minded. They're very broad. Some of the Psalms are just I and me. That is very true. Many of the Psalms, the psalmist is praying about us and we. Well, who's the us? Well, again, that's in today's setting, that's the believers. So you need to think about your fellow believers, the people in your church, the people you worship with. And when the psalm is being community-minded, you be community-minded. And don't just pray about yourself, but pray for the us, the community of believers that you're in. So that's that tip. And then tip number 14, be aware of enemies. You've noticed, along with me and along with all the others who are praying through the Psalms, that it speaks about our enemies a lot. The enemies of the purposes of God and the people of God. And although our situation isn't the same as David's and the others who wrote the Psalms, there are still people that come into our lives now and again that are actual enemies of the people of God, and they're working against the purposes of God. And you also, even if there aren't people like that in your life at the moment, you've got Satan and his hosts. The scripture says that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against Satan and his hosts. So we have enemies, and part of praying the Psalms is helping us to become aware of that and pray accordingly. So be aware of the enemies. And then tip number 15, stick with it. Stick with it. We're all on a journey, and I'm reminded about some of the long car journeys that I've taken, where as good as it's been, you never know what's going to be around the other bend. And you go around another bend and there's something else that's great about your trip. So don't stop the trip, but keep going. Keep going. Stick with it. Who knows what the Lord's going to do in all of our lives through this experience. I had my glasses back on, and it's the first two verses that are,
Yeah.
I don't know how far, I don't know how.
Stay back.
Please.
All right, and turn the page.
Now, what is your wife's name?
All right, go back to the first page.
Yeah, I shouldn't have pointed.
That's fine.
No,
Try to
it's not-
keep,
It's not up
try,
there, it's right there.
all right, yeah, just try to keep the Bible in the same spot when you turn the page. Don't go down or up.
Okay,
Try to keep it all in the same spot.
tell me when you're ready.
Okay, we're rolling. I'm gonna block the lens, all right? We'll let it sit on this for a little while.
Okay.
And then by turning the page, don't move the Bible, just turn the page.
Are these your guests here?
It's on the opposite side, is that a problem?
That's fine.
These are Doug's keys, okay? There's a lot of keys.
Very good. All right, let's go to the second one.